You've been checking out a number of schools for lead. What have you found? How many have you tested? What have the results been?
We've tested 5 sample schools at various points across the district. We chose older buildings. The results came back. One campus had quite a few hits across the entire campus, so it leads us to believe that it could be in the age of the building or possibly in some of the plumbing, the piping. The other 3 schools, one came back completely negative, no results, and then the 3 other remaining schools had 1 or 2 possible elevated areas in the campus.
So as a parent, I think they would be wondering, is my kid drinking toxic water?
At this point, I would think no. There are a few elevated samples that came back. We've taken those out of service. We're working towards bringing in 3 consultants to move through the district as quick as we can.
Which school was that at, and were they water fountains?
Which school was what?
I'm saying you've made a couple of hits.
Yes. When they test the schools, they develop a priority list. They typically look at the kitchens because there's a large consumption of water there. They look at the water coolers. Kids tend to go there after PE and classes. They also look at the classroom sinks and bubblers, which are a combination. It's not chilled water, but the kids can access that. We typically keep away from, as a last resort, the restrooms. Children normally don't go in the restroom and drink out of the faucet.
What school was that you saw those hits? Was it Bartow?
Union Academy
Yeah.
here in Bartow had the elevated results.
And you don't think the kids were drinking or consuming that water in any way?
At this point, we have tested the devices. We've gone in and made corrections, and we're waiting for a second round of results that were conducted yesterday morning. We should have those results back by Tuesday.
Well, that's very general. I need to, I'm not real bright, so be very specific for me. Where did you find the bad water? Was it in a water fountain? Was it in the bathroom? Was it in a kitchen?
Most of the indications were in the classrooms where they have a combination sink. It's a faucet, and then the corner has a bubbler. It's just straight tap water.
But the kids were drinking it then?
Yes, they could potentially be drinking that.
And you said you corrected it. How do you do that?
We identify where the source is at. If it's an isolated in a room, we are pulling all the fixtures out of that particular device and bringing them up to monitor devices. And once those are installed, then we're retesting the water to make sure.
Issues in water is nothing new. Why has it taken this long for Polk County to do these very basic tests and find what it's now finding?
There was all indications. There was numerous testing that was done in the 90s. Things that were found wrong there were corrected. But since then, there hasn't been any testing up until this point. In light of the recent findings, we've decided to go through and backtrack through the entire district again and test all the water samples to make sure that the children are receiving safe water.
Why wasn't there any testing since the 90s after it had been clear that there were sources identified for potential lead?
I cannot speak to that. I'm not sure what happened in the 90s. I wasn't here.
How many more schools do you think need tested now?
Well, we have 150 schools. We're going to test all. We anticipate through early next year of having all the tests completed, at which point, as we find results that are elevated, at that point, we'll be addressing those isolated cases as we go through.
From the way I read it, it seemed that there was random testing inside the schools and there were a few fixtures that were found to be an issue. Do you now have to go back into those schools and test all of the fixtures in those schools that tested positive because there are some results that have come back?
We're required to test 10% of the building. We went after, in the testing, we went through the high priority use areas. The children are most prone to use water, which would be your water fountains, your bubblers, your kitchens. And when we found the elevated readings, we are supplying bottled water to those classrooms and to the kitchens at this time.
What will happen to those fixtures, pipes, et cetera? What will you have to do next then?
They'll be taken out of service and replaced with modern fixtures.
What about the piping that leads to them?
If the second round of testing comes back that it's elevated, then we'll possibly look at addressing it farther into the walls.
How much of those, or what usage of those will take place between the time that those fixtures are replaced and the testing that takes place? Will the kids still be able to access it?
No. When we test, the actual fixture is bagged. until we receive an all clear on it, either through replacing the fixture or through waiting for the testing to come back clear.
Can you understand why parents are frustrated that their kids are going to school, there's lead in their water, and it hasn't been tested for decades?
I can understand that. I mean, that is our ultimate concern, to make sure that the kids are safe here, the staff is safe, that we're providing water. But this is, like I said, this is a problem that's been going on since we started running water. I mean, as far back as the 1900s, they were still using lead pipe to send water to schools, and it still is in place today.
What do you tell parents?
We tell them that we're making every assurance to have everything tested to make sure that the water's being provided is safe. And if we have readings that indicate otherwise, we're taking corrective actions through repiping, through exchange of fixtures, bringing up modern type fixtures in there, or providing bottled water.
You have 150 schools to test. How long is that going to take? And are kids going to be potentially drinking this water, continuing to drink it until these other schools are tested?
As we're coming into the end of the holidays, we anticipate having 3 consultants out there taking between 12 to 15 samples per week, or I'm sorry, 12 to 15 schools per week that they can get through. So potentially in early next year, we should have all the testing results back. Not that we're going to wait until all the tests are done. As soon as we receive results back, at that point, we'll address the problems as they come up.
But if you're only testing randomly 10%, isn't there a chance that one of those bubblers, those fountains, those sinks someplace else in the school still has an issue and the children could still be exposed because you didn't test that one?
Well, in the case of the 3 schools that we tested that came back with only 1 or 2 devices across the campus of the 30 samples that we're taking, came back with a negative result, those there will be addressed on a case-by-case basis. Now, whereas at Union Academy, we have several hits. We had 10 out of 30 on the campus. That would indicate that we're going to have to take corrective actions through those fixtures and possibly the rest of the campus.
So that's what I'm saying is that if there was a hit on a campus that showed, how do you know that there aren't other fixtures because those were just random tests? Don't you have to go back and test all of those now?
It's not necessarily. I mean, we've tested what's required by the EPA. We've tested 10% and only have 1 sample out of 30 come back with a positive result. That would indicate that it's more than likely it's on that device. Whereas in the case of Union Academy, it's in 3 or 4 buildings, so it indicates that it's systemic throughout the buildings. So in that case there, at Union Academy, we'll be looking at more stringent measures than we would were if we just had 1 or 2 possible results that were elevated.
The levels were pretty high at that Union Academy. What do you say to parents there? I mean, kids have likely been drinking that water for years.
We're anticipating better results on the second round of testing because there was discrepancies on how the test samples were taken. There's a lot of factors. How long the water is sat dormant in the pipe, whether the aerator is clean or clogged, because that's just a big screen that catches all the contaminants that come through there. So if things like this haven't been cleaned and checked prior to the testing sample, another sample is how long the water is sat dormant in the pipe. The EPA recommends that when you take a sample out of the faucet for drinking, that you run the water. Just flushing the line clears all the contaminants. But the longer that the line sits within activity, then it actually concentrates, the concentrations build up.
What prompted these tests to happen this year of all years?
Well, in light of recent media coverage in Hillsborough County, our district decided to get ahead of this and be proactive, and we would go through this so that by the end of or actually the beginning of next year, early, we could have an idea where we stand and start taking corrective actions.
Do you know how much this is going to cost to test and replace a lot of these fixtures?
The initial testing is going to be somewhere around $150,000 to test these 150 schools. They average between $800 and $1,000 per school to take the samples. As far as the repairs or needed, it's going to be a case by case. There's no telling whether it's repiping, changing a fixture. It's hard to say at this point.
And they're mainly in older schools.
Yes, the guidelines and the laws went into effect in 1986 that no lead-based products could be used in water, in potable water. So since 1986, we're relatively confident that anything after that is going to be safe. Prior to that, and we do have a lot of old buildings. We have a building that's 1914 when it was built. So that's in Haines City. But we're going to work through the older buildings first and go from the oldest to the newest. We anticipate that within just a few months, we can have all the testing done.
Any chance any of these schools are gonna get shut down while this is going on?
No.
The one at Union Academy that was like 1,400 parts per,
That was Winston Academy
okay.
in Lakeland.
What was that a water fountain?
It was a sink in a classroom. We believe it was a bad test. We'll know more on Tuesday when the results come back. But the sink was actually turned off underneath the cabinet because there was a water leak there. So we're not really sure how long this faucet's been turned off. It could have been off for days or it could have been off for months. We're not sure.
Where does this money come from? We know that the budget has taken some hits recently, so.
It's student safety is first. We're going to find the money. I mean, if some of the renovations or other projects have to be pushed back, but ultimately the safety of the kids is our first priority.
Not to detract from the effort that's going on right now, but then your answer to parents who would say, my kids may have been consuming water in these schools untested for so many years, is that it just wasn't required?
Based on the EPA, these are all recommendations that we should do this. We're trying to get ahead of this and assure the parents that they're safe. By all means, they can go to their physician, and there's a simple test that they can conduct with their physician to find out if they do have exposure. But at this point, we don't anticipate any children having health concerns or
Why?
there's just no indication that there's anything there from the testing that was done in the 90s. There was a lot of corrective action that took place in the 90s up through 2000. So, I mean,
And yet 4 out of your first 5 schools that you tested came back positive.
that sounds bad on the front end, but when it's only 1 or 2 sinks, it could just be a brass fixture. An easily just placed a fixture on a sink could be the corrective action that it needs.
Just for clarification, it wasn't required of school districts to do the testing, you guys just wanted to do it?
Make sure I get it right. The Safe Water, no, I can't remember what it is. Safe Water Drinking Act requires private water sources to be tested. We have one, that's El Torres Elementary, that's on a private well, and that is monitored and tested daily there at that school.
Have you used a coat on any of the older pipes in your system?
Use the,
A coating, like if you have a lead pipe that's use a coating to keep it from degrading.
that is one possible repair type. We have used it in the past. There's a firm out of the West Coast in Florida that they actually open up the entire plumbing system. They purge it, they clean the inside of the pipe, and then they inject a type of epoxy resin in there. And once it hardens, it forms a seal around the pipe, which will in fact shield any lead solder or anything from contaminants. We've used it for leaks. When we couldn't isolate where the leak was at, they've used it, but this isn't an approach that can be done for this corrective action too.
Any idea that that's been broken down in any of the piping system of these schools that's listed? Sorry, my voice is cool.
I'm sorry.
Any idea that the coating has broken down in the pipe? It might have caused some of this lead to make your samples go up when you did your testing.
From the little bit I've read on the EPA site, they indicate that over time, the mineral deposits and stuff that build up inside of the pipe actually shield any of the lead substances getting into the water. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that there's in there. But the coating is 100% that they inject in there. It seals everything.
What's the bottom line message you want to send parents?
That the student and the staff's safety is our main concern. We're getting in front of this. We're going to take whatever actions we need to ensure that the kids are provided with safe drinking water. Anybody else?
How will you be updating the public on results as they come in?
We have a website, that there's a link on our website that they can go to for any information. My phone number's on there, my email address. Anybody that has any questions, they're more than welcome to call me or email me, and I'll respond.
Thank you, Roy.
Is that it?
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right.